When you think of Rapa Nui, also known as Easter Island, the first thing that comes to mind is probably the giant stone statues called moai. But carving massive human faces isn't the only creative way the Rapa Nui people brought rocks to life. They also used millions of ordinary, non-face-having rocks to sustainably grow food on their barren little island for hundreds of years. In fact, these islanders have a lot to teach us about resilience in the face of today's environmental challenges, and how you can turn rocks into food. Sort of. Rapa Nui is a tiny, isolated island in the Pacific Ocean, 3,800 kilometers west of South America. The first human inhabitants arrived from other Polynesian islands around the year 1200 CE. At first, the island was covered in palm trees, but then the humans got to work cutting some of them down, and the rats that had hitched a boat ride feasted on the saplings and nuts. Within a couple hundred years, almost all the trees were gone. Without the trees' protection, strong winds eroded the soil and dried it out. Rainfall was unpredictable, and when it did rain, the soil drained quickly rather than retaining moisture. The island has very little fresh water, so irrigation wasn't really an option. And to cap it all off, the soil was relatively poor in nutrients. In fact, you might have heard this as a cautionary tale about ecological destruction. According to this debunked and frankly insulting narrative, the population of Rapa Nui grew dramatically during the period of deforestation and then crashed because they were too greedy to use the island's resources responsibly. And sure, the deck was kinda stacked against them, but human ingenuity came to the rescue. The archaeological evidence actually shows that the Rapa Nui people were able to sustain a small and stable population, probably around 3,000 to 4,000 people, for a long period of time. They did this thanks in part to a set of agricultural techniques called rock gardening. Rock gardening is pretty much what it sounds like, putting rocks in gardens or agricultural fields. Rapa Nui is volcanic and has many outcroppings of basalt, so people would break off rocks from these outcroppings and carry them to their gardens about 65 meters away. When life gives you rocks, make rock aid? They constructed 3 types of rock gardens. For veneer gardening, they placed a layer of fist-sized rocks directly on the ground. Lithic mulching involved adding broken rocks to the soil from the surface down to about 20 centimeters. The last type was boulder gardens, where they simply placed large stones on the ground. In some gardens, as much as 80% of the surface was covered by rocks. Now, this still doesn't sound terribly useful. If the fields are full of rocks, where are all the vegetables? But trust me, this actually works. Rock gardening offers a bunch of benefits that enabled the Rapa Nui to grow tubers like sweet potatoes. Remember how dry the soil was? Well, rock gardening decreases evaporation, allows more precipitation to filter into the soil, and decreases water runoff. Studies done elsewhere suggest that over a 2-year period, soil with rock mulching can store 30 to 40% more water than the bare soil does. The rocks took care of the runaway wind, too. By creating a rough landscape, rock gardening slows down the wind and reduces soil erosion by at least 4 times compared to non-mulched land. Rock gardening also puts the kibosh on pesky weeds, and as the weather gradually breaks off tiny fragments of basalt, the soil gains some nutrients like calcium. All this leads to more seeds successfully sprouting, heftier plants with deeper roots, and higher crop yields. We don't know how big the benefit was for sweet potatoes on Rapa Nui, but in later experiments, the yield of maize in a rock-mulched field was up to 4 times the yield in a non-mulched field.
Thank you to Jump for supporting this SciShow video. Jump is a statistical analysis software that makes powerful analytics quick and accessible. And they're working to fix the reproducibility crisis. You know how sometimes a really exciting finding is published, but then no other labs can get those results even after trying to conduct and analyze the exact same experiments? Well, Jump addresses this with consistent reporting systems that let you share your workflow with any other Jump user. Then they can take the exact same steps that you did and keep things consistent. Of course, the easiest way is to share with another Jump user, but they're not going to keep all of this sweet data analysis away from the world. You can also share with pretty much anyone by saving the data as a Jump report, where it can then be shared in another format like a PDF, PNG, or Word document. Or you can use Jump Live or Jump Public to share stuff privately and publicly with all of the visual interactivity of Jump, but in a centralized real-time data hub. And you can get going today at jump.com/SciShow, and you'll even get a 30-day free trial.
The Rapa Nui weren't the only civilization to realize that humble rocks could work wonders for food production. We don't know how widespread rock gardens used to be, since Western archaeologists have often overlooked them or misinterpreted their purpose, but evidence of historical rock gardening has been found all over the world. For example, the Hohokam people in present-day southern Arizona built thousands of rock mounds to cultivate agave during droughts. And more than 2,000 years ago, the Nabatean people in the Negev desert in the Middle East grew olives, pomegranates, and apples on rock terraces. Now, it's not like you can just throw some rocks in your garden and expect a bountiful harvest year after year. Rock gardening decreases the organic content of soil by up to 10% after just 1 year, and it's not exactly easy to mix organic matter back into the soil that's covered with rocks. As a result, the practice could deplete some soil nutrients over a few decades. A saying among Chinese farmers using rock gardening in the early 20th century was, "The father works hard, the son gets rich, but the grandson becomes poor." Today, vegetable growers commonly use plastic mulch to achieve many of the benefits offered by rock gardening, like retaining soil moisture and inhibiting weed growth. But plastic mulch has to be replaced frequently, and the microplastics that end up in the soil and our food aren't healthy for us or the planet. So could rock gardening be a low-tech solution, especially in light of our changing climate? After all, it's not just a historical practice. Some Rapa Nui people still have rock gardens today. As the planet's fever keeps getting worse, rock gardening could help protect crops against extremely hot days. That's because the turbulent airflow over the rough surface acts like a soil thermostat, cooling it in the day and warming it at night. But rock gardening is hard to do at a large scale. Just imagine the labor involved in transporting 6,000 softball-sized rocks for a garden the size of a basketball court, let alone the 28 million you'd need for the average-sized farm in the US. Still, rock gardening could be useful for small-scale farming in arid regions. It can help farmers be more resilient to droughts, which are becoming more common and more severe in many parts of the world due to climate change. In the US Southwest, for instance, researchers have proposed that going back to growing agave in rock gardens could be a good way to adapt to the changing climate. Rock gardening is just one of many indigenous agricultural practices that Western agronomists have long overlooked. And it's amazing how simple this is, right? Can't grow stuff? Try adding rocks. So these tried and true practices, in combination with new technologies, might help us build a more sustainable, more resilient food system for centuries to come.